Hello students, this is Mrs. Durant and I am here today to talk with you about some test taking strategies, specifically answering your essay questions. I still notice that some of you have a little bit of problems with elaborating and being very specific in how you're answering the question. So let's look at some effective strategies for demonstrating what you've learned. Now, the first thing that you'll need to do when you get your exam is to read through the entire exam just quickly, just survey through. Create a quick little game plan. How much time can you allow for the objective questions? If there's 2 essays to write, how are you going to divide that time? Look at the points if they're there. Where should you spend the most time to earn the most points? And so just be a little smart in gaming those essays and strategies for managing the time on your exam. Now, why do professors give essay exams? Not to torture you, but to demonstrate that you understand material, that you can make connections. Our study strategies class is all about making connections. Everything kind of overlaps and intertwines to make holistically you a great student. You synthesize things, and that means putting things together from multiple sources that you're arguing for your point. You can think critically, but you must elaborate. Often students don't understand that in academic writing you must elaborate, and this means that you provide specific examples, that you give illustrations, that you argue your point with specific information and evidence. Okay, so just a couple of words there, and not writing complete sentences is not academic writing. So think of it as an opportunity, really, because many students who are some of the best students will stumble on multiple choice or other objective questions because they'll argue themselves right out of the right answer. But essays are the perfect place for you really to show what you know. Now, in your preparation, there's no magic, sorry. You just got to read the material, attend your classes, take good notes, review, study all throughout the semester. And once in a while, you're fortunate enough and the professor gives you an essay question early. Well, by all means, practice. If you're not going to write out the whole thing, at least write out the outline. So, or think about exactly what you're going to do there. But take advantage of that opportunity if it's offered to you. Now, there's easy steps to succeed on your essays. Let's look at those. When we're going through, step 1 is to analyze the question. Okay, this is interesting because often students will write me a wonderful essay and I'll enjoy it and I'll get to the end and I'll say, well, that's great, but it has nothing to do with the question that was asked. So make sure you're looking at the question. What are you being asked to do? Often I ask my students to circle the action words. Is your teacher asking you to define, to illustrate, to analyze, to argue? So look at what is being asked of you on this exam. Now, step 2, think about your writing process that you've learned in your writing classes. Plan your answer. Spend up to 20% of your writing time planning your answer. That means brainstorming, creating your outline. If you still like clusters, great, use clusters. Or just making lists. Think about what you know, what information is relative to the question, of what vocabulary you might want to include, what illustrations, what you have the most information about that supports your answer. So let's look at how and then step 3, I'm going to write my answer. I'm always going to double space. Often you have to use a blue book. I'm going to write a clear thesis. This is this overarching idea, this overarching combination of words that restates the question, part of the question, and asserts what I'm going to say is true. Use vocabulary from the readings, lectures, other class materials, and of course, write legibly. If your teacher can't read what you're writing, if your professor can't read it, then they'll often become frustrated with it. So don't make that mistake. Now, step 4, review your answer. Read through it, of course. Neatly correct any errors. You can strike through errors with one straight line. And since you've double spaced, you use a little caret and put corrections above. Add any information that you recall, any relevant facts. Maybe you look through the rest of the exam and you got some other ideas or you went, oh gosh, I forgot about that. Perfectly fine to add some additional information. Now let's do a practice run just really quickly here. Let's look through. So step 1, let's look at the question. So it's in at least 3 paragraphs, discuss, that's an action. Academic resources. and how you use academic resources for your academic success. Define academic resource, discuss what you knew, what you've learned, include three specific resources we learned about and how you have used those resources. Finally, describe how you plan to continue to use academic resources. All right. Wow, Mrs. Durant was wordy in that question. She tried to lay it out there for you, but let's just kind of tweeze out exactly what it is she wants. 1, define academic resources. 2, what did I know? 3 resources, and how did I use them? And 4, how am I going to continue? That's all, period. Now, moving on. Now, let's plan out this answer. So sometimes to get my brain going, I have to ask myself questions. I said, academic resource, well, I know what that is, but I can't put it in words. So I start thinking about, is that a person? Is it a facility, a lab, technology? And all my answers are yes, it's all these things. Anything that I can use to be successful, any kind of tool or any kind of resource or asset. Yes, maybe I need to think of synonyms for resource. And I begin to ask myself questions. What did I know? Well, I knew some. I knew I had time and money, but maybe I wasn't using them effectively. I didn't know much about Cameron's resources before I came to Cameron. And then 3 great resources. And this is going to be individual for any student. And so that's another thing to remember about essays. No 2 questions or 2 answers will look exactly the same, but they can all be effective as long as they're meeting the requirements for answering the question. So in these, I'll say Center for Writers, Cameron University Library, Miss Durant, my study strats teacher, maybe financial aid office was great for me, or if I use student support services, maybe that was wonderful. Maybe my resource is the rec center because I have to burn off all of that energy that gets created from the anxiety that I have trying to balance all of my needs in my academic life. Now, the last thing, how to continue. Well, I'll keep using all the ones that I've already used. Maybe I'll remember those. Other ones I'll need later on. Then maybe think about like online resources. I think what the main thing here is, and I keep talking to myself, and I say, well, knowing that I can always brainstorm your ideas, begin your essay answer with a thesis. And this is just giving your general idea, your general impression, your general assertion about the topic. Restate the question in this and begin here with something like understanding how and when to access academic resources is critical knowledge for succeeding in college classes, especially for students who are just beginning to learn at the university level. So you're just easing into the answer, but you're also demonstrating that you understand what this question is about. Okay, I've just switched over to a Word document and I copy and pasted in our outline that we made, and then I went ahead and copy and pasted in the thesis, and I gave myself a little title there using academic resources. It's always great to give your essays a title. Even an essay exam, it's nice. So I began there, and I knew also that I needed 3 paragraphs. So I kind of divided in my mind that I would put where I was when the semester began in terms of the resources, and then perhaps the definition of academic resource. I put that in the first paragraph, and I'm thinking that I would put the 3 different resources in the second paragraph, and then for the final paragraph I'll do where I'm going. That just makes sense to me. So as I begin there. So let me look to see. So I put in my thesis, and then I put in my definition. An academic resource is any asset that I can use to help me succeed. And then that's not enough, okay? That's the problem. Often we just stop there. I need to elaborate, give some examples there. And then I go into where I was when I began. And I say, well, I knew that time and money were resources. There were things I could use, but maybe I wasn't great with that. But I didn't know anything about the labs or online resources. So I say where I was. Then I transition to my second paragraph, and I'm looking there and I say resources have become important to me as I've worked this semester, and then I just lay out, and this becomes my topic sentence there, the 3 different resources that I want to talk about. And that can be any different resource. Maybe you use tutor.com a lot, or maybe you use the databases at the library, whatever it is. But the most important part here, again, is not just stating that, but elaborating. For instance, let's look at this. So I said that Center for Writers was one of the resources that I use. Now I give my examples here and elaborate. When I began my Comp 1 course, I didn't know anything about let me just do a little corrections about MLA formatting. I went to the Center for Writers in Nance Boyer. That would be even better because that shows my teacher I know where things are. And a tutor that helped me format my first paper. And she showed me how to use Word, that needs to be capitalized, to format my papers correctly. And so, you know, that's not great or anything, but at least it puts everything in place. Then I do the same thing about the library. Then I do the same thing about professors. I would give an example of how I went to a professor and they helped me through a problem, and maybe I learned something about them, established a relationship, which is really an important part of your education. So pretend that we did the rest of that paragraph with those other two elements. And then the final one, I want to talk about where I'm going from here. So I say, as I continue my classes, I will use all the resources that have helped me do well. I will also try to seek new resources at Cameron and online. For me, the most important part of understanding resources is knowing that I can find, access, and use resources to help me when I face a challenge. Really, there's no excuse for failure. That's a nice little twist at the end there. And so, of course, I'm going to have to go over it in my last step. In the last step in the exam, I want you to go over your essay again. Read through it, clarify it if something doesn't make sense, because often we're writing very quickly, and you know what makes sense to our brain doesn't always translate that quickly, and so we need to just go over it. Now remember that this is to give you the opportunity to let your professor know what you've learned. No one's trying to trick you. So just relax, think about what you know, and write. But again, here you go. Elaborate. Use specific examples, explain, give anecdotes, facts to support your assertions. So good luck, do well. I know you're all very capable, okay? So again, you're a work in progress. You're developing your skills here. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email. See you later.